via in-person, but we have no remote part tonight. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 26, or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town website an audio or visual recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in the public meeting, please email your questions or comments prior to or during the meeting to cpcemails@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be provided to the committee before the meeting or read during the proceeding if received during or shortly before the meeting. Okay. Welcome. Tonight is our public meeting, and as I previously alluded to, I had a presentation ready that I can't seem to pull off the internets, but I think we can proceed. I remember a lot of it, and I think I remember a lot of what I did because I just did it today. So I can talk about that a little bit, and I have some other exhibits that I think will be helpful to anybody who's interested in submitting a CPC project for fiscal year 25. So any questions before we get going? All right. First of all, North Andover has been an early adopter in terms of the CPC. We've had it since the early 2000s. And I just ran the numbers today. In terms of what we've been able to do as a community with the CPC is we've, spent $46 million on projects, and we've had a match of approximately 30% on that, which is much higher than other communities because we got in early. And the way that it works is the town has a surcharge on property tax that we collect. Over a certain threshold, the first $150,000 of a home's property is not assessed. And then after that, there's a 3% surcharge on the property tax. And so between that and the state match, like I said, $46 million. And it's been pretty evenly divided. So we'll talk a little bit about the categories of spending, and we have a good diagram from the website that I'll pull up. But essentially, between open space and recreation, that's been about 37%. Historic preservation has been 36%, and affordable housing has been 27%. So of the three kind of primary uses, and we'll talk about, there's a little difference between recreation and open space, but of the three primary uses of the CPC funds, Community Preservation Act funds, really, we've hit it pretty well. Pretty good spread among those two. I mean, I think we always are saying that affordable housing is probably the toughest one. And I think that's true just because it's more difficult. There's more planning involved, and there's more bureaucracy. And I think that, definitely affected it. So it's been, a tremendously effective program. And before I started any further, I want to say, that's huge. 156 projects, $46 million, over $10 million from the state, over $10 million from the state. I mean, these are really good numbers that help our community improve. And before I do that, I think I want to talk mostly about the fact that this is entirely community-based. So one of the things I didn't know before I really started coming to these meetings and seeing what the CPC did is that we do not propose any projects. All the projects come from the community and various actors in the community. So it really is a great example of citizen initiative. And I think, I've pointed to this project a number of times. When we talk about a project wrapping up on Lake Chickawick, the boat ramp, we've basically seen that one guy basically said this boat ramp doesn't work, it could be dangerous, Getting into the office, getting into the water is a little precarious. It's not a good situation, and because of his efforts, Mr. Johnson, because of his efforts, we basically, have a huge, we had a huge project that took, several years, and now we're going to have that, probably wrap up this fiscal year. That construction will be done. So it's really pretty amazing, I think, to think of all the things that have happened because of the Community Preservation Act, and because citizens have, essentially stepped up and said, this is an important thing. Another thing I wanted to talk about is it's also a unique committee in that it has representatives of other committees on it. So we have representatives of the Fields Committee, we have representatives of the Planning Board, John Simons, who's not here tonight. We have representative from the Historic Association. We have representative from Conservation, John, and we have Ron from Historic. And we also have a seat from the Housing Authority. So, of the seats, of the 9 seats, 5 of them come from appointments from other committees in town, and 4 of them are appointed by the Select Board. So it's really unique, and it definitely brings a great wealth of experience and to all these issues that come up and projects that are proposed and how they're going to affect the town long term. And I'd like to say too, for myself and the other Select Board appointees, this might be our only meeting of the month, and the other 5 have been terrific, and they may have several more meetings every month, several more nights out. So it's really it's like a double duty for them, and I certainly greatly appreciate their service, and I know how tough it is to get out, another couple nights a month, especially in the busy times of year. So I think those are all really important things. Anybody else want to talk about important things in the process and structure and the projects and in the history before we move on a little bit on the process?
Well, just that a lot of what came out of a lot of these projects was sweat equity. That there was the money from the state and there was the money from the town, but there's also a lot of private groups either donated money or came and just did the job. There was when the playgrounds were first being done, neighborhoods came together and built the playgrounds. The hut down at Grogan's Hut, the fire department stepped up, and all the firemen came down there and did the work, no charge to the town. So we got a big bang for our buck with how all that worked out. So I think it's just something that needed to be, talk about community. I mean, that was the greatest part of it. So.
Great. And then I want to talk a little bit about the 4 categories. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll talk about the process. So we linked to this off our website, and that presentation that I have, I'll make sure to send out to anybody. I can grab your emails after, and we can make sure it gets out to everybody. But essentially, there are 4 main categories of projects that we fund. I think the most clear cut is open space. We can acquire open space. We can create it. We can take it from one use to another. Could go from agricultural to preserved, open space, etc. So, we can buy properties, create properties, preserve properties, and then these are sort of the tricky parts. In open space, we cannot support it, so we don't do maintenance. So. Once this is done, that's why we work really closely with FONAT and some of the other groups in CONCOM about how we're going to maintain the open spaces that we have and the trails that are on them and so forth, because that can't come from CPA funds. So we definitely work very closely with other groups on that, and we don't restore open space unless was already acquired by them. And then I'm going to jump over to recreation a little bit because I feel like those are kind of more similar uses. And we've definitely seen, originally, when the CPA was passed, it funded mostly passive, what they called passive recreation, so trails and things like that, but not playing fields and so forth. And the law was amended, and so that's, I think been very beneficial to towns with a lot of activity and a lot of pressure on available dollars. So same, we can acquire, create, preserve recreation facilities. Again, we can't do ongoing maintenance. We can rehabilitate. So, we've definitely seen that and seen projects going out there. And then I'll do housing, and I'll do historic last, because I think that's probably one that's trickiest. So in terms of housing, we can acquire a property and do that. Stevens Corner is probably the best example in North Andover now, right behind the school administration building, just to the back of it, where it was sitting vacant. I think it had been a retirement home, and it was reconfigured into affordable housing back around 2008, 2009. It's been a very successful project, and it's there. So that's a good one. We could create from the ground up. We haven't done that yet as a community, but it could be there. And then in terms of preserve and support, we've done a lot of funding. We've worked very closely with North Andover Housing Authority. We helped fund an assessment of their capital needs, and then, for several years we were funding tranches of projects that they would do to rehabilitate their houses. So, like, I think a good one is the housing down by Grogan's. That's the official name of that. It slips my mind. Is that the veterans housing? I can't remember. But we did kitchens and bathrooms. Yeah, we did kitchens and bathrooms there that were, pretty impressive. We did a number of doors and a couple other ones where the, doors and weatherproofing, which really helped the residents and helped with heating and cooling and so forth to sort of keep, energy costs down and so forth. And we also, in the past few years, have done a number of emergency generators so that, when there are power outages or serious situations, any residents who have, oxygen or needs like that can have some access to power, which is, vital in those things. And the last, in terms of historic, we've done a number of historic projects in town. We can acquire historic properties, we can preserve historic properties, and we can rehabilitate and restore them. I think in this category, what we've found is we have to first make sure that the property is of historic significance, and that can be done one of, a few different ways. It could be designated it could be on the Federal Register, like North Parish Church. It could be on a state list, or, and we've seen a lot of this, it could be brought to the North Andover Historical Society for a determination of its historic significance, to the town. And so we've seen a number of those projects over the years. Ron, did you want to talk a little bit about any notable projects over the past few years that, in terms of preservation, that you'd like to highlight?
Well, we did we approved a pretty significant amount of funds for the North Parish Church restoration of the exterior, the spires, the windows last year. We've partnered with the Ridgewood Cemetery Group within the last couple of years to do a number of projects with them also. Those are the main ones that I think we've funded in the last couple of years.
We've had some good contributions to the Stevens Estate and the library, over the years, kind of in a programmatic fashion, which works for the year-to-year part of it. So.
And I think the interesting part about the historic is also we also place restrictions on the properties once they're renovated. So they have to remain sort of true to the historic character, and you can't, and we extend sort of protections on properties out into the future so that they're around, so that the investment that the community makes through the CPA funds is preserved. Okay. Any questions? And then every year, we're supposed to have at least 10% of our funding in each one of the buckets. And if we don't spend the 10% and say there were no projects for affordable housing, we set that aside, and its future use can only be in that category. So I think most years we definitely have a project in each category, but some years we don't, just given the nature of what's happening.
Where are we at with that right now? In terms of, do we owe one category more than another?
Affordable housing, a little bit, just like
Yep.
a few years where we were short of the 10%,
Okay.
but not much. And we've worked really closely. I think it's definitely been improved. We're working with the Affordable Housing Trust, where we've been able to appropriate funds to them every year, which they can use for sometimes smaller projects more flexibly than we're able to. So instead of coming with a discrete project, we can fund the Affordable Housing Trust with a few $100,000, and they can make grants out over the year to carry out that part of it.
And as you know, I'm a new member of the Commissioner on the Housing Authority, and my understanding is they're not going to bring a project here this year. I think they're still working through some other projects, but I will say, having been on that group, I was appointed a couple months ago, I learned a lot about what this money has done for our housing authority, and it has truly been, for the people that live there, transformational. Like, that's not overstating it. And my understanding is that, there are other commissioners, leaders, executive directors of other housing authorities across the state who have said to ours, who are jealous of ours, because of the money that this committee has put into it and has really improved the lives of some of our low-income folks that live there. So it's a really positive thing. I know the work of this committee is really appreciated by the Housing Authority and sees real results for people that live there.
Any other questions on the categories or examples? Sorry that I'm here, but this is the only way I can project and control things. Okay. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the process and the calendar, and I'll go back and pull up the calendar. So starting about 2 years ago, we started with a notice of intent application that we have a deadline of, I think this year, I don't want to give an exact date, but we're usually talking about December 1st. And the notice of intent we developed because what we found is it's kind of complicated and it takes a long time to come up with the project. So you may think, I have a great idea for a project, I'd like to do this, and we ask you to, and we saw before we had the notice of intent, when people would submit an application in February, we would meet with them and say like, wow, this is a great project, but we have a number of questions, and we'd like to get these questions, we have to have these questions answered before we can recommend funding this project. And sometimes that process may take months. They may have to go back and get more estimates from a professional, from an engineer or an architect or a construction company. Or they may have to research some ownership things and try to figure out the legal structure of how they're going to do what they're going to do. And so we found many worthy projects had to wait an entire year because they just didn't have enough information. So we've asked groups to come with an early application at the end of November, beginning of December, and then we've used our meetings in December and January to meet with those applicants and ask them questions early enough in the process that they have time to refine their application before they make their full application in February. And we have kept, then the full application on the website is there, and we have kept to having that deadline. And it doesn't mean that what you submit in your application in on your notice of intent or your application in February is the final amount or a final proposal approved. That deadline in February is very helpful for us because we have to take a look at the universe of projects and how much capital we're looking at and how, what kind of funds we have available, and be able to sort of weigh, what was appropriate to sort of fund in any given year. And a lot of it is timeliness. I mean, some projects can only be done once. If it's a land acquisition, this piece of property might only be for sale now, and so you have to move that up. If it's something that can, and if we had to look at a couple different projects, we have to make those determinations and kind of figure out how we're going to use the available funds. So we found that to be helpful, and that when the groups come in December, we can have a conversation and get some refinement around how that works. Any other points anybody has on the process? The notice of intent early, and then the final application in February. No? Okay. All right, so we'll take a quick look at the calendar. We can see the key deadlines. The notice of project intent application deadline at the end of November, in I guess a little more than 2 weeks, and the formal application deadline right at the end of January. And then, as you can see, we have 2 meetings for the notice of intents to be renewed, one in December and one in January. And then we start meeting twice a month. The burden gets pretty tough through February and March. We meet twice a month, and sometimes we even add more if we have more to get through and we can't fit them all in. And that's when we hear from the applicants and kind of review and try to come to decisions about these projects around the end of March. And then we also have to take them, kind of do a little roadshow and go out to the finance committee, the select board, and explain the projects to them, because they're going to recommend or not recommend favorable action. And then our committee just makes recommendations. So the entire job of our 9 folks is to get the applications, review them, and make a recommendation to town meeting. And town meeting has the final say on all approvals in terms of what gets funded. And that happens in May of every year. And the date's not set yet, but that's sort of how it goes. Any questions on that? Okay. And then I wanted to take a minute and just talk about what makes a good application, what types of things, and I think this is where I want to call on the committee, kind of talk a little bit about the most important issues and the most important things to address if you are proposing a project, and what folks should be looking for and investigating as they're going. So I'll take any volunteers.
I think you need to make sure that the project that you're presenting satisfies the criteria for acceptance to be funded under CPA. We obviously look for some, maybe public access that provides access to the public so that the community gets something back from a project. I think that's important to consider. Obviously, the thoroughness of your application, good thought into your project in terms of finances, whether you need engineering to support your construction estimates or your designs, to make sure that you have the money in there and you don't have to come back to this committee again for funding again for the same type of project. So you want to make sure that you've covered all your bases of costs that you need when you consider putting a project in front of us.
One of the things I've been on the committee a few years now, and one of the things that seems to be a common occurrence every year, not for all the projects, it's the odd project here and there, is open space, for acquiring open space. And there's been misunderstandings that we, the town, would go forth to buy the property. And in fact, what we asked the people to do is to team up with a partner, such as the trustees of the reservation, or, and with them, we can work together as a partnership to fund that acquisition of the property. But we don't initiate, we don't go out necessarily to buy, so.
Yeah,
Add a little bit to that, Tim. The cooperative nature of the projects is highly valued. If we've got a group of citizens behind a project that can raise funds, can provide sweat equity, as Terry touched on, that's a good factor in favor of a project that might qualify for CPA funding. But the nature of the project it's important that the nature of the project be an improvement, that it not be maintenance, it not be, it's got to be capital, yeah. It's got to be an improvement. It's community preservation. We're trying to preserve open space in this instance forever. And, having another group is very important. I'm very familiar with the open space and recreation part of it, and it's just a wonderful partnership where we acquire open space, but then we have to figure out a way to keep it in its current natural state, and the recreation is what provides that element of it. It's volunteer work, but it's essential for the town to maintain these conservation restrictions. So the partnership is very important, as you mentioned, Tim, but the nature of the project has to be improvement, and, be it housing, historic, open space, it's got to be that nature, so.
and I would say too, consensus, especially on historic projects, making sure that you involve the Historic Society early, and I always mix this up. The Historical Commission, I'm sorry, I always mix those up. Historic Commission.
One of the things I was going to point out, because we've
Yeah.
had issues with this in the past, if it's a project for historical preservation, if the resource isn't currently on the state register of historic places, the project does need to have a determination from the Historical Commission that it is a significant resource, so the earlier you can get that on the agenda for a Historical Commission meeting, the better.
And then I think just at a 10,000 foot level too, Bill, it's like, I'm just thinking, I can tell you what I was thinking about last year is simply, are we being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar? Is Joe taxpayer here in North Andover gonna think that his few $100s or whatever it is that he contributed to this fund this year is worth whatever that project is? So I think I am, and I assume all of us are thinking about, do we think this is, does this benefit his community?
Technology, sorry.
I know. The technology today, yeah. That's the TV folks heard me. If you're on TV, you heard me.
Okay, right, and no, and
Right,
I think too, like
but
the
does
other.
it benefit? That's generally what we're thinking. Is is Joe taxpayer gonna think that this was a good use of my dollars? And I take that seriously when I'm thinking about what we want to approve and what we want to send back.
And I'd say too, like talking, or if it's any sort of a project that involves a change of use, is talking to abutters early, and getting them on board before the application comes in. So like statements of, notifying abutters. There's definitely tools the town can help you with getting a list of abutters and notifying them. So, and talking to them early so that, they're not showing up at town meeting and saying like, I didn't know how this would affect my property rights or enjoyment of what's going on.
Honestly, ask questions early, ask them very early, so you're ahead of the game. Don't be afraid.
All right, I'm going to come back to the seat because the presentation part is over. We'll open it up to the audience if there are any questions about the process or categories or anything that people want to be doing as they're getting ready to perhaps propose a project this year.
Stan Lippert, 43 Stonecliff Road. My question is it possible to have a contingency grant based on some other event occurring? Like, for example, CPA grant, which would be contingent upon the passage of a warrant article?
Yeah.
Has that ever happened?
I don't think we've done anything.
What do you have in mind?
Well, Schofield Mill, right? So that will require a warrant article to transfer that property. But I'd like to not wait an entire additional year to start being able to work on that property. Because if we miss the window now, we're waiting now for another whole year, so it'd be.
So there's already money on that property, right? I mean,
Yeah, and yes, there's 200,000 that the town has, but I'm just wondering if, to make that all work out, and to Adam's point, if we transferred the property, my thought is that money would go back to the town grant would go back to the CPC. It wouldn't be a.
it's not transferable.
Yeah, I don't think it's transferable, so that would go back, and then we'd have another grant of, to do renovation on the property. So the question is, could we submit a contingent grant application?
We'd probably have to ask, but I don't see a problem with it. It just how it aligns it with the warrant, so that,
Right.
one's before the other.
Yeah, so I guess that would mean we'd have to do the, kind of a draft of the warrant article to go along with that, so you guys could take a look at that too, to sort of see how the funding, how it's gonna work, so. Okay, but that doesn't seem like a non-starter completely, right? I don't think so. Okay,
There is precedent within the Commonwealth for this in different towns on community preservation committees. And I think the best route is to have town council consider it,
Okay.
and, because there is precedent, and that's usually what they go by.
right.
And we have a great resource in Boston who helps us with, information about
Okay.
little things here and there, community preservation, and he would be a resource to tap if we, to answer your question.
Sure.
But there are resources out there, and I think it's a question worth pursuing, Stan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Steve Nugent, Athletic Director at the high school, and this is Director of Operations, or
Personnel and Operations for the school department.
Greg Landry.
Joe. Greg.
So we're coming, I guess, with more of a preview of something we're thinking about on behalf of the school. To set this up, I think 21 years ago, North Andover High School opened in 2004. At that point, we were probably the envy of anyone who boarded us or came to any of our games or our school, because it was the state of the art. We haven't really done much in those 21 years to improve any of our facilities from an athletic or outdoor recreation standpoint. So specifically our tennis courts. There are 6 courts on campus that are teetering on being a liability. They are used by not just our wellness classes during the day, our tennis teams in the spring, but a wide range of residents. And with the racket community growing with each day, whether it's tennis or pickleball. So we're going to be coming before you, hopefully, with a presentation that's looking to redo the courts completely. We've been told that if the cracks were filled, they'd be back in 3 or 4 years to do them again, and it was a waste of our money. So we're looking at a complete redo of the 6 tennis courts and some other things that we would like to talk about. Did I miss anything yet?
No?
Did I hear you right, though? You're going to transform them into pickleball courts also?
Yeah, so I think the 6 courts, 2 of them would be lined specifically for pickleball, and the other 4 would have like tick marks or whatever it's for the ability for people to adjust, to make sure they could still play. So all 6 courts would be accessible for pickleball. 2 would be specifically lined for that. The big picture down the road, and this is where we're still struggling with, is I'd love for us to have the ability at some point in time to add lights to this facility, specifically in the spring when our tennis teams have practices or matches, and they're practicing there until 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. It's really hard for any of our residents to get on, especially with darkness. Even later in the spring and the summer, it's not an issue, but for that 2-month period, really a tough time. So I think that's one thing that would really love to see this facility, again, be brought to state-of-the-art, something that everybody around us would be envious of, and something that I think would be accessible and considered a huge asset for anyone who lives in town. And as a resident, I share your sentiments in making sure that every dollar goes to something that can benefit the entire community.
Has there been any preliminary design?
So great question. So right now, Gale Associates presented at a couple of different boards a year ago with a master plan for the town. We're working with them on some other things that might be coming down the road through the town's purview, but this is something separate that we're looking at. So we do have a design, we do have cost estimates, so we're in a decent spot with all that information. Did I miss anything?
No?
Yeah, I think really like a good application would really talk a lot about the public access and like what percentage of the time of the year are the courts available for public use, and what and not that school use isn't public use, but it's less restrictive to the general population. So I think that would be a good thing to include in the application, definitely. And abutters too, I think, with lighting, although it seems to be a little bit removed. It's not right on the edge. There's a pretty good buffer there.
Yeah, and I think the lights with this would be lower than, say, a ball field.
Yeah.
But true that, that's one thing that I know we've tried this in the past, and I'm going to do a road show as well, just making sure that our closest abutters, are aware, and hopefully we can, gain their trust and come before you that we've had that conversation.
Steve, do you have a surface, a court surface in mind?
No. No, I think we're pretty much going to go after the hard top, that would be basically replicating what was put in there 21 years ago, obviously a more modern version of it. They would, and ideally the scope would also, that there's a wall in the back, if anyone's used the facility, that, a hitting wall if you're there by yourself, replacing that. We talked about the lights. And then right now the courts don't have, one of the things in the plan, Rick, was the access, like say for an ambulance. We don't really think about those things. We do for ball fields, but access for, we don't really have anything to get like a medical vehicle in there if needed. That would be something that's really just making it an opportunity for a wider gate in one spot. Something that came up in conversation just a few days ago, and I thought it was pretty unique. Yeah.
Did my eyes deceive me last Tuesday when I drove by? And it looks like the one side is actually falling a little bit, or of the court area?
Probably not. There are cracks everywhere.
It's in tough shape.
It's in really tough shape. And, you know, our boys coach, who's relatively new, I think 3 years ago, he went out and resurfaced one of the, like, painted one of the courts on his own dime over the course of a summer project. And it looked awesome, but that court still looks bad, but it just looks better compared to the other 5. So,
And there are matches played on those?
we do. Yeah, that's our home court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing I think you're going to need to address is the noise factor with pickleball.
Yeah.
Because those courts aren't really that far from the houses that are on Osgood Street.
Well, you know what they did at McAvoy is they put up screening.
Well,
Yeah.
then you
I
might
mean,
need
the
to,
ones
like
at
I said, we're going to need to
the
address.
ones at McAvoy are
The
right on
application will have
top
to
of the
address that
abutters.
because it is going to, the abutters
Yep.
are going to be concerned about that.
So
Thank
Steve,
you.
this is all gonna be new, right?
Completely, like, down to the earth, redone, new fencing, the whole 9 yards. Yeah,
And accommodate pickleball, which doesn't currently have.
correct.
You'll probably want to address the durability of the new surface as a positive feature for the town.
Thank you, Jack.
And are we talking, we'll learn more when we hear more from you, but are you thinking about like a larger footprint or essentially the same footprint?
Exact same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would this include the walkway going in that's collapsed?
Great question. So, yeah, if you're familiar with there was a walkway that went through
Right.
over a little waterway there that's blocked off now. So we're still kind of, so yes is the short answer. Where that walkway exists would really be determined by the final site work that's done by Gale and their engineers. They've been working on that. So the question was whether or not we can recreate the pre-existing one that was there 21 years, or go around that marshy area and create a new one. But it would encapsulate that as well as part of the project.
Right. Be a safe entrance.
Yes. And that involves, I mean, that's the work, but it also involves, the safety of people parking on the other side of the road and accessing it, just, what's the most, what makes the most sense.
No, I think it's, I think we can all see the benefit and look forward to seeing you in a few months.
This is the right type of project for this committee, no question.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Appreciate your
thanks.
time.
Okay, is there any other comments on the public committee part, which is where we're sort of explaining the process and talking about potential projects coming, and then we have a couple specific items. So we'd sort of close the public meeting and say, now we're going to go on to the agenda.
So I'll just mention one that may be coming from the Historic Commission. As people might be aware, there's a committee working on the Historic Preservation Master Plan that was called out from the Town Master Plan. I haven't been able to pin down the consultant as to when that's going to be finalized, but in anticipation of that, I think most of the core recommendations are there, and the Historic Commission may be coming forward with some funding requests to fulfill some of those core recommendations. It may,
He's talking about February, March timeframe for wrapping it up.
yeah, so it's going to be close in terms of, we may be asking for funds before the plan is actually available, but hopefully the plan will be available before the town meeting, so that we can at least count on that.
Okay, all right. So we will kind of gavel shut the public meeting and move on with the agenda.
Nobody else wanted to speak?
What?
Nobody else was.
Anybody else want to speak? Questions?
No, Joanne is on the agenda for Johnson Cottage, so that's like a, yeah.
She's behind the.
That was on the,
I didn't know if you saw her.
public meeting section, too. Was that an example?
Okay. All right, we can definitely ask. Okay. All right.
You gotta end the day sometime, right? That's right.
All right. Joanne, do you want to come for Johnson Cottage? Okay.
Thank you so much for having us this evening. I'm Joanna Collentine-Kerr, Executive Director at the North Andover Historical Society, and I'm bringing with me Antoine
Trombino
Ponte, he's the caretaker and responsible for facilities at Johnson Cottage and the Founders Hall. Would you like me to introduce or reintroduce this subject
Yeah, why don't you try
formally?
to give like the like
Quick lowdown on
quick,
that?
yeah, the Cliff
Yeah,
Notes version.
wonderful.
We read the memo. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, Founders Hall is part of the Johnson Cottage compound, which is owned by the Historical Society. And just in this past year, we've had over 500 children participating in school trips and field trips to this compound. We've had 4 or 5 open houses with lots of people in town who have been to check out the amazing work that has been completed in this past year. In 2023, the CPC and the people of North Andover approved $130,000 for several projects, a whole list of projects including painting, redoing the floors, flood remediation from the flood of last October, I think it was, as well as some other projects. And we're about 60 to 70% complete on that project. We had the interior painting done at Founders Hall in the spring, or it was just finished when I arrived at the Historical Society in January. Also in January, we had a failed furnace, and the heating system basically collapsed on us, and we've been working on other projects. We were also given funds from the CPC for Parson Barnard House, which is great. We've just installed 2 heat pumps at the Parson Barnard House, and the CPC work there is basically we're at 85 to 90% complete on the Parson Barnard House. So we are making progress. This kind of threw a spanner in the works, as we say, where I come from, with the failed heating system, and we had to kind of put a stop to any of the additional projects that had been funded through the CPC last year, including repairing or restoring the windows and the shutters which are facing the common on Mass Ave. So my decision, after thinking long and hard about it, was to request if we could use the remaining funds. We've got just under $13,000 in remaining funds for the windows and shutters at Founders Hall, to see if we could use those funds to install the new heat pump, which would completely eliminate the use of fossil fuels in Founders Hall, which is really exciting. And Antoine obtained a couple of proposals for the work, and the total price, depending on the type of system that we use, would be $23,000 to $25,000. Understanding that we can get a mass save rebate for 50% of that, that would take our cost down to, as it happens, $13,000, which is what we have outstanding with CPA right now. So that my first request is whether we could apply those funds that we have outstanding to the heat pump installation. And then secondly, a rather cheeky question, would we be able to submit another request for funding for the window restoration and the shutters at Founders Hall in 2025?
Would the work be done now?
Yeah, it would be ready to go, really whenever we're able to call in the contractors.
You have no form of heat right now?
There's heat in the Johnson Cottage side of the building. It's Founders Hall specifically that doesn't have heat.
But the Founders Hall, it was painted last winter, and we're afraid of the damage to the paintwork that has been accomplished.
We had to run heat pumps all winter.
Space
Well,
heaters.
space heaters,
Yeah.
space heaters, electric space heaters. And we'll probably be doing that again soon if we don't get a new system.
Yeah.
I don't think we can.
The question is whether we can reappropriate those funds.
I don't think you, I don't
Right.
think
You can.
I don't think we can.
Okay.
Not by our choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it's the way it is. If it wasn't in the original request, it can't be added. And I'm not even sure that that's not a maintenance item.
You could alternatively take on some risk, finance it through your organization, and then apply for the funds, in this cycle,
Yeah.
so that they would get approved and they could pay it off perhaps, as approved by town hall, or town meeting, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure that it would qualify under historic preservation. It's a maintenance project.
Was there a system there previously? There was.
Yeah.
That makes it harder.
I mean, it is kind of an interesting question because we are talking about, how can you preserve
Yeah.
the work that's done if it's not, climate controlled, like to the, and that, maybe it's worth, Joanna, we could put you in touch with,
That's the question.
yeah, maybe we can put you in touch with, Stuart Saginaw at the Community Preservation Coalition and say, like, is there precedent in the state for sort of doing this like a modern system in a historic facility? Like, because, obviously heat pumps are not historic, but the facility is historic. So
Yeah.
that might be the way to sort of approach it and see, like, could we hit it from that angle?
Have we done that in the past? Have we approved
I mean,
a
we've,
tool that keeps?
Yeah, I mean, we've improved like electrical improvements to Barnard House. So I mean, we're not that sort of.
Off the
I
reservation.
think
Yeah,
we did
yeah.
fund a furnace in the gatehouse at the Stevens Estate. I don't know, were you there then?
It was before my time, but I think like 2012,
Yeah.
there was a new furnace
Yeah.
installed, yeah.
Yeah, so that might be the way to go, is to
But we wouldn't be able to transfer funds. no.
Right, I think the transfer funds
Right,
part.
that's a no-no, okay.
Yeah.
Although, would that 13 grand come back to us?
No, they'd use it for the
No,
windows.
They'd use it for the windows,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we would hold on to it for the
You'd hold
winter.
on to it for the windows, got it.
Wing Jack's idea is actually very good.
Mhm.
You could temporarily finance it. There's a lot of things going here.
Yeah.
First of all, can we pay for it through the grant, through CPA grant? And if the answer is probable, then maybe we go out and finance,
Right. And would the CPC approve in the next fiscal year for us to be post-funded for a project that we'd already completed?
We did find out that that's okay. We did find out from that's legal, but we're not wild about it because we think I think our thought was it sets like a bad precedent because, then it's, we're approving after the fact, and then could that encourage people to just, I'll do it and then just apply and then,
Yeah.
I think.
Well,
we'd be-
because the point of this committee is to create new
Pre-approve,
projects
Yeah.
in the community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think.
I got to tell, there's some
yeah.
special circumstances here. I hear exactly what you're saying about using space heaters, and you just painted something. You spent $17,000, and I'd hate to see these things,
Yeah.
so.
It's kind of a danger too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
So
Okay.
it sounds like it could be worth a chance of applying next year,
Right.
but getting a loan, getting the work completed so that we can go ahead and get the heat pumps installed, and hopefully, because I've been in front of you today, this isn't a precedent-setting situation for the town to have to deal with.
Okay.
Okay.
you were saying, Bill, you think a good next step for her is to
Yeah,
reach out?
check in with the, yeah, I'll send an email and copy you in with Stuart and send your memo and copy you in and say like, you know, what are your thoughts on the legalities involved and sort of proceeding this way, yeah.
See if she can get herself on more firm footing.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That'd be great. Thank you, Bill. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No problem.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you. Okay. All right, next we have, we got a very detailed update from the director of the library on the stairs. And I think, you know, the long and short of it is, it was a lot of work, sort of substrata work to do that and seal the building up. Was, you know, very involved, and, you know, we know it's been going for a long time, but the drainage is much improved, and the building is much more secure in terms of being waterproofed, and was done very, very carefully. And, you know, looks like it's getting to a close fairly soon. So I think it's a good news story. And I know it's a highly visible project. We had some questions about it, and so that's kind of great that we're getting to the end there. So. Any questions? I know they're putting in, like, now they're putting in sort of the ornamental things, the handrails, the lights, and things will be, new ones will be installed, and the seating and everything will go in the next few weeks. So, and we will be invited to the, grand reopening. So that invitation hasn't come yet, but we're on the list. So, any questions on that? Okay.
Good project, worth the wait.
Yeah. And then, community preservation plan. I had a meeting with Stuart a few weeks ago, and we were talking a little bit about some of the projects coming up for the town. And, especially talking, I was talking a little bit about the schools and how that's a little different than what we've had before. Like, a lot of our recreation facilities have not been school-based, and just what are the challenges there in terms of who owns the land and what the use is and so forth. So some good things to be thinking about when we're looking at the grant agreements, because, it's different, like the school committee owns the land and not the town. So, if they wanted to put a school on it, they could. And we have to kind of think that through as we do the improvements. So that was good. And then as we talked a little bit, we went talking a little bit further, and he said, like, how's your CPA plan? And I said, we don't have a CPA plan. And it turns out that we should have a CPA plan. That's a requirement under the law. So, I think that'll be sort of a heavy lift. It might be like a year or two process. But I think, as I look through and as if you, browse through the community preservation website, I think we have all the elements of a plan, concepts of a plan, maybe, borrow a phrase, in pieces, and it's just kind of putting it together, in one document that could be helpful. And, and just thinking about what we did here tonight, even, if we had this whole, 30 or 40 page PDF on our website, it would sort of help people. And then, I think the first part is all the process and all the things we've talked about, and what we're looking for in the projects. And then I think that the second part is, we really, as we think about what's going on in the town and some of the other plans that are already made, like the open space plan and so forth, like, are we ready? I know last year, when the Barker house farmhouse went on the market briefly, the whole town kind of stirred and fluttered over, will this whole parcel come up? What's the value of that parcel? How would we be able to purchase that if it came up and preserve it? Or how much of it? And those are things we should obviously be thinking about in terms of, what do we have? What are our resources? What are our options? And what are some of the competing priorities that we have? And there are some also kind of fundamental tensions in this whole thing too. Open space and affordable housing can be a little bit in tension. Like, we don't have any place to build housing, affordable housing, then we can't. How can we sort of balance those, items as we move on, through different acquisitions and so forth, so.
Do we have access to other towns' plans?
Yeah, they're all there. Yeah.
So you outlined it a little bit, Bill, but like, did other towns' plans, do they essentially say, obviously they have kind of a how-to guide to walk people through
Right.
on how they present something, which I think would be helpful to have on our town website.
Yeah.
We kind of have, we have some of that stuff already there. But does it say, like, these are the priorities of our
Right.
CPC? Like, we know that we need more housing, or we know that we need more recreation fields, or we know that we need more open space. Is that kind of,
I think they're more generic.
or are they pretty generic? And also, because we have a plan, do we still have the flexibility to deviate from that plan when something great comes before us, or something that we think is very important?
I'm sure you could put some wiggle room in any plan.
I
Yeah.
don't think you need to want to make it too restrictive.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah, and that's what we saw. I think a lot of it too is also talking about what their priorities are. I think a lot of it's philosophical. I think some of the things could be, some of the questions that have come up. Do we decide and sort of have a set policy, like private property, right? Like, some towns like Newburyport, I think they've done lots of grants to houses for have people, preserve historic houses that don't necessarily result in any public access, right? Like, maybe we just want to make a blanket policy that says,
So we can include like our own local policies in there, or
right.
suggestions,
Right.
that we have.
Right.
Like we usually, to the conversation we were having earlier tonight, we typically don't approve projects that are already being completed.
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Probably once it's created, we have to make it a yearly thing, because
Review.
as the board changes,
Yeah,
their goals may change, here, so.
that's right.
So it would probably have to be reviewed on a yearly basis.
Yeah, so I think it's good. I think, it'll take some time, and we might even need to, spend a few dollars on that. Some of them have had consultants be involved with it, and some of them haven't, so. Maybe it's something we could start after we finish the,
We've got a number of different examples of
Yeah.
towns. I'm sure we can pick and choose from stuff, so we don't have to start
Right.
from scratch.
Right, definitely.
Maybe this would be a good job for Zach.
Okay.
The good news, Zach, is some of the best ideas are stolen.
Yeah.
Happens very frequently.
Yeah. Thinking of AI, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So that does the CPA plan, and then a housing authority seat. So the housing authority seat right now is currently held by Tracy Watson, who's the chair of the housing authority. Tracy has been unable to attend a lot of our meetings over the past 2 or 3 years with things going on with her personally and professionally. And the housing authority is, I would say it meets, twice a month. It's definitely a very active sort of body, and I would
Once a month.
once a month.
Yep.
Really, I thought it was more often, but it's definitely
It's important.
a more involved committee. And so I approached her early in the fall. We started to talk. She had somebody who was interested in serving. I would also like to point out that historically, sometimes we haven't had a rep from the Housing Authority, just because no one wanted to volunteer. And so for this coming year, we talked, and now with Adam having filled the vacant seat, she feels we have the perspective of the Housing Authority on the committee, which is a good thing. But it does not seem like they're going to send another representative.
So
Yeah.
could he take that seat and then they open up another
Do you
seat?
have an open seat there?
So we talked about that too, but your appointment is only until
So March of 2026.
March of, okay, I thought it's a
Yeah,
whole other
so I
year.
do have another year.
Yeah.
You know, I feel kind of strongly about this. I think, actually, you just kind of made a point I was going to make. You just laid out the fact that, my understanding is CPC started as kind of an open space sort of thing, and now it's an open space thing, it's a recreation thing, it's an affordable housing thing, it's a historic preservation thing. And a lot of times those things are not in concert. They have competing priorities. They may be competing for the same space, same funding, etc. So that being said, it's important to have a representative from all those areas here on this committee. It's important that we have 9 members. It's important that there's somebody here from the Housing Authority. Now, whether I become that person, I think we can discuss as a housing authority, but I think in terms of us, this board, I think we should, and I'm not sure exactly what our action should be, but I think that we should really take a stand that this position needs to be filled. And if I become that person, that opens up an at-large seat for somebody else in the community to be here. And that, we get somebody else into the process. But there's supposed to be 9 people here. And for the last however many years, not putting any fault anywhere, but for the last however many years, for there not to be a representative of the Housing Authority on this, in this committee is not right. It needs to change. So that's my personal opinion on it, whether it's we issue a letter, whether we, kindly ask, whether we do something,
What do we have to do to
more stringent.
have Adam be the representative of the Housing Authority?
I think you
that
have
group
to.
would have to approve it, right?
I think,
The Housing
yeah.
Authority.
The
Would have to
Housing
approve
Authority
it.
would have to approve it, and then
Right.
you have to,
It's in the select board.
Yeah.
Right.
I know.
And so that then my position here would be, what would happen? I would resign my at-large position
Right,
essentially, and then
right.
they can open
they
that up
can
to
open
another
that up to
person.
another person, yeah.
But it's not right not to have another space.
Yeah,
It either takes up a space from the community, or we're not representing the housing authority.
Right.
So,
Yeah, no, I agree.
somebody should be here.
Is there anybody else on the Housing Authority that you're aware of that would want to serve?
I think we'll have to put forward the question and we'll see. But either way, to me, the housing authority has a responsibility to name somebody to this committee who shows up, whether that's me or somebody else.
No,
We'll put that onus on you to
Yeah.
figure out who it is.
Right. But I mean, in terms of this committee, I wonder what actions we can take, if any, to encourage that to happen. Whether that's we ask nicely to start,
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what I did. And I
Yeah.
said, like, hey, and I think I've said this before when we get to the end of the process. We have a great committee. I think everybody, we've had really good attendance. People are very consistent. People are very respectful and so forth. So we've been able to do it, but I think it's tough. I mean, everyone wants to get, out of New England at one point during February and March. So it's hard to, it's hard to get.
but we can attend
That many
here
people.
virtually. We've had members
Yeah,
attend
yeah.
virtually.
But like,
you know?
sometimes you don't want to. I
Yeah.
mean, and I don't think it's a I think the expectation is that you make all the meetings you can, but sometimes you're going to be, I'm going to go to India for a week,
Right,
I'm going to
yeah,
miss a
no.
meeting and, different stuff is going to happen. So you have to adapt. Yeah, no, I'm not getting up at,
Right, but there's a difference between I can't make a meeting and I'm not, we have no representation from
yeah,
that board
no,
for
I
years.
agree. And the larger point is like, hey, it just cuts our margin down if we have 8 members versus,
That's right.
if we have 8 members versus 9.
And it could put us in a stalemate if
Yeah.
we can't agree,
Right.
you know?
So,
There also may be some urgency to it, because I don't know if it's changed, but the original act required specific representation from those boards, and
So that's what I was gonna ask you, is
Yeah,
there
I mean,
a
the
requirement that they name
if that's
somebody?
changed,
I mean,
that may
there's
have
still a-
changed, but at
there's-
least back then, the original intent was that conservation, planning, housing
and I
was on
and I
it.
think like, yeah, and Tracy has to,
Yeah,
and and Tracy is still officially on the committee. So I think that, maybe
she's
I'll
probably
put it in
filling
there
that
formally and
slot,
say like, could we do this? Could you
Technically,
resign your spot? Could Adam take the housing authority spot?
Technically, there's representation, but there is no representation.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, we did have people from the housing, it wasn't like it was nobody for a long time, because McCarthy served
Right.
for almost 2 years or something.
Yeah.
And Mary Beth Susi was here for a few years, but, and then it was Tracy. So, I mean, there has been representation,
Right.
just not great attendance.
Right.
I'm not suggesting this, but I'm just curious, can we expel a member?
I don't think we have bylaws that
That's
strong.
it.
I don't think we address that in our.
Well, I think she's fine. She told me she was gonna resign.
She'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So,
All intents and purposes, she's off.
yeah,
Yeah.
so,
I think-
next, what do you think for next step?
I think Bill needs to initiate it with both housing as well as the select board. And just say, this is what's happening, any questions? And then have your housing appoint you. Done.
If that's what they choose to do.
Oh, yeah, they may not like you.
Well, well, no, I'll put this forward, we're all getting to know each other. But it was a joint session of the Housing Authority and the Select Board to decide who would take that seat. It was a unanimous vote of the Select Board, I will say, to appoint me. But I only got 1 vote from the committee I'm on, so I have some work to do in terms of bringing some of those folks aboard. So that's something to think about.
Yeah.
You guys like me, right?
I don't know.
Boy, you must not have been very good.
No,
way we can
no,
terminate somebody here?
It wasn't me. No, the reason is we had 2 fantastic candidates. I wasn't the only candidate. That's why.
So there is somebody.
I
There
don't
was-
think we have to make it that difficult. We need to emphasize to the housing authority that they need to
That's my.
have a member that
Yeah.
can consistently attend the meetings. They can choose to, that it's gonna be Adam.
Or
And
someone
if
else.
that case, then you can choose as to resign your at-large position. Or they could choose somebody else and you stay in as the at-large.
So unfortunately, Rick, you're stuck with me either way.
Say,
I
Adam,
think it's
you-
here for baseball.
Yeah,
I think it's a fit.
yeah.
I think it's a fit.
Okay, so I will, I've had conversations, I will make a formal communication to the committee as a whole to say we need a representative appointed and consistently attending, and we can kind of let it go and have it go from there, I would say,
Can I suggest that we keep this on the agenda
until it's done.
until it's done?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay.
How often does the housing authority meet?
We meet once a month. Yep. And our schedule's online.
Okay.
Who's the chair?
Cheers, Tracy.
Tracy.
Okay. All right.
Next meeting is, next week, November 21st.
Okay. All right, I'll get it in.
So if you can,
Yeah.
You need references?
It's good to know I have them if I need them.
Yeah. Okay, the next item on the agenda are monthly report. And, I don't think, not too much of note. Everything we know that we have. Yeah, we have about $10 million available. We have, a number of encumbrances, the largest of which is the field project. And, we continue to do pretty well. I checked on the funding this year, and we raised about 2.3 million, and we got about 562,000 in matching. So, pretty good year. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, we had about 850 matching. We also had about $678,000 in interest. So that's been a good benefit of the higher interest rates is that our fund balance is increasing. So
How does that compare to previous years? I'm just curious.
some years we
that
were
like-
talking like $20, $30, $40,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's a big.
So it's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have one thing. One comment. Would it be possible to get the monthly report distributed as a spreadsheet in addition to PDF? It's just really difficult to read as a PDF.
I can ask, because the accountant is the one that produces the report, so I can see if there's something.
I agree with you, Ron.
Yeah, it's tough.
Just gotta hit that plus sign, Ron.
I know, but then you can't get it all, I'd like to be able to hide columns so I can see what I actually want to see as opposed to try scrolling back and
I
forth.
second the motion. There is one item on the budget. Who can we talk to, or Zach, you can talk to? I don't think the 1836 Meeting House should be part of the community housing budget category. It really belongs in the historical preservation. So that's $480,000 that needs to be moved from one bucket to the other.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get that sorted out. 'Cause I have it in my own record as historic preservation, because I put the application in there, but
This is the official record.
Yeah.
I don't maintain.
See, I did my job.
I know you do. I wait for that finance committee.
Okay. All right. One more item. CPC meeting minutes of 10/10/24. Tim and Ron were absent. Do we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yes, we have 5 people. So we have a,
Motion to approve the minutes is drafted. Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, 6-0 with 2 abstains. Oh, 5-0.
5-0.
Yeah, 5-0. Okay.
Need an audit there.
Yeah. Any further motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Good
Thank you.
job.